interface of my project. In my form, I have a label that says enter an integer, and then I just did a bunch of spacing down to is it a prime number, and then prime factors. That's all one label with several blank lines. I have a text box named txt input, a button named btn process number, another label over here that says can be evenly divided by, a list box named lst divisors, another label, this one's named LBL prime, we'll refer to it in code, and then LBL prime factors. And on these two I gave it a little bit larger text and made it red, made it bold. The only thing we're coding here is our button, and then coding the various methods that will be called by that button. Let's take a look at the button code. So the instructions were to create 3 method calls. The first one is what we would call a subroutine. It doesn't return anything, or it might be referred to as a void function or void method. And it's called show divisors. And we're going to pass it the mynum value that's being brought in and parsed as an integer from our txt input text box. Then we're going to call isPrime and pass it mynum, and the value that's returned there is going to go into our LBL prime text label and the text property of that label. And then the text property of LBL prime factors label is going to equal the value that's returned by prime factors and passing it mynum. So let's take a look at the show divisors here first. Show divisors, we're going to clear the list box. We're going to go a loop from I to I being less than or equal to XYZ. XYZ is the values being passed, that's mynum. And we're going to increment I each time through the loop. If XYZ modulus I, whatever value I is equal to 0, in other words, there's no remainder, it's evenly divisible by I, then we're going to add the value of I as a string, using toString, to our items collection of LST divisors. So this method returns a void. There's nothing, it doesn't return anything, but it simply does something in building out our LST divisors list box items. isPrime, passing it my number. Again, I'm going to passing into a parameter called XYZ. I'm going to set a flag that's of Boolean type to true. So flag is a variable. I'm going to go through my loop for int I equals 2. I don't need to worry about 1 because I know the number is going to be divisible by 1. We're going to repeat the loop while I is less than XYZ. I don't need to do equals XYZ because I know the number is going to be divisible by itself. And we'll increment I plus plus each time through. Again, if XYZ modulus I is equal to 0, I know it's evenly divisible. I'm going to set the flag equal to false, meaning there was something that went into, that was evenly divisible into that number that was not 1 or the number itself. And I'm going to break at that point, and that's going to take me out of my loop. If flag equals true, we'll return yes, otherwise we'll return no. If I don't get any values where the value of I is evenly divisible into XYZ, in other words, there's no remainder via the modulus operation, then flag will never change. It'll go through this loop all the times it needs to, and then it's going to return flag equals true and return yes. Notice that both forks here on our if-else have a return value, and what's being returned is a string value. And then finally we had LBL primes factor.text equals prime factors mynum. So we're passing mynum into prime factors, and again I'm going to put it into a variable or parameter called XYZ. I'm going to set an integer variable of I and set my string, I'm going to call it PF for prime factors, equals XYZ.toString, whatever the number is the user entered, plus an exclamation, space equals, space 1. And then I've got a new integer called new XYZ, it's going to equal XYZ. And the reason being is as we go through the loop and I find something evenly divisible, I want to change the target that we're dividing into. So for I equals 2, again I know it's one's going to go into it, while I is less than XYZ, I plus plus. While new XYZ modulus I is equal to 0, it's evenly divisible, then new XYZ is going to equal new XYZ divided by I. So let's say our number is 10, And the first number we're looking at is 2. Well, 2 goes into 10. It's evenly divisible. So I want to take the value of 10, which is new xyz, and divide it by I, which is 2. So now my new xyz is 5. So the next time through the loop, I'm going to see if 5 is evenly divisible by 2. If it's not, we're going to move on to the next number. So since it is evenly divisible, though, I also want to add that to my string. So pf plus equals, I'm going to do a string of a space, x being for the multiplication symbol that most people are used to, plus whatever the value of I is converted to a string. That'll go through the loop all those number of times that it needs to and calculate the string value that we want to return. If pf equals xyz.toString plus exclamation equals 1, in other words, nothing was added to it, we're going to concatenate to the pf string an x and then the number that we were originally inputted. And then we're going to return pf. So we're only going to add the number itself if it's a prime number, is basically what's happening here. Let's test this. So I have an integer value of 30. I'm going to process the number. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 10, 15, and 30 all evenly go into the number 30 with no remainder. So it's not a prime number. And 30 exclamation of the factors of 30 equals 1 times 2 times 3 times 5. So 6 times 5 is 30. Let's change this to, say, a 17. 17 is only evenly divisible by 1 and 17. Yes, it is a prime number. And 17 factors are 1 times 17. Let's try a number like 64. Again, we have 7 different numbers that are evenly divisible into 64. So it's not a prime number. But here it's 1 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. 49, 1, 7, and 49. 7 times 7 being 49. So here, the factors are 49 equals 1 times 7 times 7. Let's do one more prime number, 23. And we see that it is a prime number. If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the C# Xamarin Programming Cohort playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos that I create, you can click my picture up in the top right and subscribe to the channel.